All right, well, good morning and welcome back. We are here for another remarkable morning, ABA conference, day two. Day two at conference, that usually means more coffee, right?
Yeah, a little slower start normally.
Yeah, and so we've got our coffee a little closer and maybe in a second cup, right? So we're ready to roll here, but yesterday there were some phenomenal sessions, as well as I want to open with the general session. Andrew Davis, who I had actually seen before, but wow, he knocked it out, and specifically the pizza reference. Can we talk about the pizza reference of cutting up our marketing budget?
Yes, please, let's talk about it.
Like that, I think that hit home to me, just watching the way that marketing budgets are typically allocated, but also just understanding all of the roles and responsibilities we're cutting up and forcing into one pizza, right?
Right.
And it feels like he made this reference of Windows 98 and saying, this is our 1999 pizza budget, and, of all of our marketing team. And then he's like, but we just keep slicing these pizza pies thinner and thinner. And we're hoping to now squeeze out SEO, SEM out of what used to be our event budget. But we're still doing events. So how did that resonate?
Yeah, well, for me, it was an incredible analogy. And I think he did a wonderful job really telling the story of the evolution of marketing as well, because there's a lot of people in the bank that are bankers that are now in a marketing role, and there's a lot of new concepts, to them too right now. So I think he did a wonderful job really walking us through that evolution of marketing. But the struggle's real. The breadth of the marketing function today, it's incredible, and it really is unrealistic to think that you could be a master of all of that. And so I think he did a wonderful job painting the picture of like what conversations need to take place at your bank around, like, do you want me to be an expert in SEO? Because if you do, I need to understand these skills. I need to understand what's expected of me. So I thought it was a pretty powerful message to take back. And I also think I want to kind of give him credit as well, like adapting that presentation to a virtual setting as well, right? Sarah, we commented a lot on that too. It wasn't just looking at somebody presenting a Zoom. I thought the effort that he put into really driving engagement and making it really entertaining and captivating through that, I thought he did a credible job and was a really strong start to conference. What about you, Sarah?
Yeah, no, and I thought it was also, again, just very relatable, especially when we were talking, when your team is small and lean, that pressure to add in everything and stay on top of everything and all the current trends. And it's like, do you focus on one piece of your pizza and just try to make it the best slice of pizza that you can possibly have? Or are you continuing to, add and cut? And so just a really great way to kind of start off the day and set a good tone for the other sessions. I felt like there were so many themes that kind of just kept coming back to that, and kind of through all of the sessions throughout the day, just lines that kept reinforcing itself. So great day one.
Yeah, well, and as a different team, I thought this was really fun to watch. You were watching different sessions from different perspectives, just for everyone's benefit, right? Like, I get to be founder, and so I don't have notes today. Jody, you've got colorful notebook.
Got my loyalty loop.
And Sarah, you've been sort of like drawing diagrams. Sarah leads up our design group, and really, it's fun to see just the different personalities and the different perspectives. So, I wanted to dive in a little bit as there were some sessions about building a marketing team. A huge shout out to John Hanley, who was really leading a bunch of those efforts in setting those up. But he was on one of those panels as we were thinking about setting up and managing a team. Obviously, we need those different personalities to span that gamut. How did you? I know both of you sat through that session.
Yeah.
What did you think of that one? Led by Hunter, right?
Yeah. Our boy Hunter Young facilitated that conversation, and it was great. And it was wonderful too, because there was diversity on that panel as well, from different asset sizes, different geographies too, which I think is something that is a very real part of the conversation too, because not all banks or markets are created equal, and it requires different skill sets and different areas of focus. But they had some really great dialogue around building a marketing team. So what are the skill sets that are needed on your team today? Had really great conversation around that. The second point they really dived into as well was efficiency and effectiveness in your marketing teams as well. And Sarah just brought up too about having, leaner marketing teams and being resource constrained, budget constrained. And so one of the panelists too, I think was about a 500 or 700 million in asset size, a two-man team, right? So efficiency is the name of the game. How can I produce content as quick? How can I be timely and relevant? And there may be some sacrifices on quality or maybe analysis, but you have to make some of those hard decisions to be able to again, drive growth, drive revenue. So that was really insightful for me. And then the third point too is just really like being a leader as well. So how do you actually become a marketing leader that drives organizational advancement, that has again, the seat at the table is like the constant theme at this conference too, but like what do you need to be bringing to the table every day to make sure that you're heard, but that you're actually really adding value. So there was some really good talking points there as well.
I think even just, being a team leader, just some of the advice that they gave of making a list of like, what do you do on a daily basis? Like, what are your tasks and expectations? And physically write that out so you can kind of look to see where are the gaps with expertise, where's the gaps with ownership and things like that. And I think sometimes, especially when you are, a smaller department, you get so many responsibilities, you have so many hats. And so to actually take the time to like list that out, I thought that was really good advice. And then also, I know this is something we can relate on, of just a great tip of that 15-minute daily check-in, of like, what needs to be shared, what needs to be asked, like, so that you're making sure every day you're pushing that needle forward. You're continuing to stay on track and to get that perspective. I think just taking that back to just, that practical, like day-to-day leadership of your team it was really good.
Yeah, there was one quote. Sorry, Ben, to interrupt. It's like asking your questions around prioritization too, and it's like, is it diluting your job or distracting, right? Is it really going to impact that? And I know something within our team here at Social Assurance, we kind of have that, reference point of like, does it make our clients' lives better? Does it align with strategy? And is it going to help drive revenue for the organization? So having whatever that kind of reference point or Northern Star is, like having some of that, dialogue and questions when you are going like, hey, do I need to spend half an hour on this? Or is it going to, align with any of these items? So I thought there was some really good just reinforcement behind that as well.
Oh, I completely agree. And, it was really funny yesterday because there's always these conversations you're having offline, right? Like, so I was having some of these text message conversations as well as another Slack conversation with a couple, banker friends. And I literally had this extreme at the same time. Within about a 30-minute period, there were a couple that were saying, hey, we are bank marketing teams of one.
Yeah.
And like, we feel like that's a specific type of management style and just execution style. And then at the same time, I was texting with a friend at a $15 billion bank who was saying, hey, sometimes I'm going to this session and it's talking to bank marketing teams of one. And so we're seeing that blend in the same conference, in the same sessions.
Yeah.
And some of these offline conversations are kind of trying to balance that out, I think. And I think it really is a lot of those principles apply. They apply to us. They apply to all of us, understanding how do we manage those specifics, but also understand we've got a vision. Like we want to go somewhere.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting too that you brought that up, because I think we see it a lot even with our clients. Like we run the gamut of $300 million banks, north of like 20 billion too. And what's really fascinating is even regardless of the size and department structure, like the core challenges are still the same throughout that entire kind of experience too. And I think that that's one of the things that conference really helps combat too, is it's like you're all equals, right? And you're all dealing with similar challenges in varying degrees, but it is that theme of what do we need to overcome, what do we need to overcome together, how are we going to go about that. I think one of the things that was really insightful in that panel discussion too was this whole concept of kind of expediting the learning curve. And meaning like, when do you invest in your people invest in FTEs, invest in training and education, invest in resources, or when is kind of the right time to, you know, maybe outsource alternatively as well. And I know, Sarah, we talked a lot offline about it as well, but I know you had some thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I love the question that Hunter posed of like, when do you insource and when do you outsource? And something we talked about is, you know, sometimes as a team, you might feel like you have a breadth of knowledge, you might have a breadth of understanding, or again, like those multiple hats that you're owning, but where are you lacking that depth to be able to get ahead of the learning curve, right? Because the trends, like, it's not stopping. Like, it's the pizza is going to keep getting smaller, you know, going back to that. And so, you know, that depth of expertise to make sure that what you're doing and, you know, why you're doing it and, you know, the purpose behind it and all of that is aligning with where you're going. So I thought that was just a great example of just that gauge of the learning curve.
Right. And the speed too, right, Ben? You know, like as you alluded to, the pace of marketing is moving so fast, and it's not just learning the foundational components, right, of like digital marketing or SEO or SEM or things of that nature, but also staying on top of that. And the reality is, like, you're a bank marketer and you need to know banking, and you need to know compliance, and you need to know a lot of other, you know, components to the job too. And so I think there is some really good talking points for bankers to be able to go back to their bank, and especially we're going into strategic planning. I know a lot of our clients have already started strategic planning and budgeting, but, you know, some tough conversations to have, but really, really important ones to have when they get back to the bank. And I think that's one of the great things of conference too. You take your notes and, you know, you arm yourself with information to have more informed conversations with your C-suite. So I think some really, really important discussions to take place as we start going into 2022 as well.
Well, and so often when we're looking at how do we accelerate that learning process, we're looking for what's the outside resource that helps me to accelerate that in a way that we can accomplish it for 2022, right? Or like we know that we need to improve the way that traffic's coming to our organization. We're going to have to reach, you know, oftentimes outside, right, to do that. And I think that's a great conversation and debate that it's a really healthy time to have it at a conference.
And I think the other part of the healthy debate as well is, how do we measure success? I think, you know, this last year in particular, or 18 months, and I know we're all very sick and tired of talking about it, but it's a very real thing that impacts, you know, obviously our personal lives, but how do we run a business and grow a business going forward? And I think, you know, the last 18 months, there's been a lot of distractions, or at least, you know, qualitative versus quantitative measurements for success, right? Like being, okay, do we have our employees? Are they coming to work? Are they safe and healthy? Did we get the PPP loans like taken care of? And okay, that's a success, right? Like we got through the day, it was a success. But I think we're starting to really see some shift in what the new MVP of metrics, you know, are. And there was a great panel discussion with, you know, Shelley Lofton and John Oxford, Kimberly Kashke, as well, like talking about this like transformation and evolution. And I think that those are the other conversations with leadership team too, like how are we going to define success going forward? Like what wasn't maybe important to us 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you know, 6 weeks ago, maybe really crucial, you know, KPIs going into the new year. And I know our crew has talked a lot about, obviously, the evolution of digital, and really just understanding like how are you engaging with your people today, where are your people engaging in your content, and how are you going to measure success around that. And I think you know, understanding, you know, your channels, understanding, you know, your website, and not these like top level, you know, vanity metrics, but understanding what those data sets actually mean, understanding that your website now is your most trafficked branch. And that's a really important number. It may not have been important to your CEO a couple of years ago, but it's really important that your CEO understands the amount of touch points that are taking place digitally and how that influences retention, growth, you know, and other things, revenue that your CEO cares about.
Well, it's amazing because we've developed these very intricate funnels, right, for inside branch traffic. And we've said, here's the KPI, here's how many people came to a branch, here's how many went through these processes. And, I think that's why you're pushing, this digital health review that we're working through, which is, let's look at this health review and then understand what those KPIs are digitally so that we can get down into those very specific numbers.
Right. It's just so important to be able to tell that story and understand it. I think everyone's very aware, and there's varying degrees of expertise across, obviously the industry. Again, like the pizza analogy, right? Like people get it and understand it, but do they really know how to act on that data and what it means for their organization going forward? And so I do think it's incredibly important to take the opportunity now to understand where we've been digitally as well, understand where we're at today, but then really how does that inform where we need to be going forward? And, in its most basic, kind of format too, like, how engaged are people on your site, right? Like if you're trying to acquire customers digitally, do you know how much time they're spending on the site? Do you know what content they're consuming on your site? Do you know where they're converting on your site? Or are they just there and then they're leaving? Because that's a customer literally walking into a bank branch and going, nah, I'm not feeling the vibe here. And then they're leaving. And if you saw that happening on a day-to-day physically in your branch, you'd be up in arms about it. Yeah. So I think we need to pay that same attention to the digital experience too. And I think being able to tell that story and again, arm these bank marketers with some insights to say, hey, like, we need to be paying attention to this, I think is the gift that I want to be able to kind of give to some bank marketers today too. I'm happy to kind of beat down the CEOs with you.
But along those same lines, I appreciated that John in that session, he kind of gave the call out to don't underestimate the qualitative metrics as well and evaluating those things and your brand too. Like, how are you measuring your brand? What are your KPIs or what are your goals with what are you doing with branding? Like, how is that being represented even within your digital marketing and on your website, how you're engaging in those digital platforms, but then also in physical and things like that. So I thought that was just a good reminder of sometimes you just get so quantitative focus with metrics where it's we're about building relationships, building personal and brand trust,
100%.
Building those things. And that's going to come from those qualitative things that you're bringing into your brand.
Yeah.
I love that you went there right away. I was just thinking how does this brand actually contribute to those KPIs? Yeah. And I think that's really what you're nailing is that there's so many of those opportunities where, John's doing that phenomenally. I love his football ones with SEC shorts, but there's so many different ways to do that with a brand. And we had some great conversations yesterday in a number of sessions that centered around brand and how's that shifted over this last year and a half as well.
Yeah. And I think just also everything we do with our Community Hero series and things like that of people talking about the importance of their community and their focus in the brand. I always go back to Amber's Farley's quote that she talked about of how these are people that live in their community, they work in their community, that's the core of it. But what are you doing there? What is your brand adding to that, and how are you communicating that, and how are you showing that? And so I think just again, it was all connected. It all just kept reinforcing itself, and just great conversations there.
Yeah, so a lot of other good sessions we touched base on. I caught up. Eric Cook had a good session yesterday. There were some. I really want to give a shout out to Shelly Regan because she was everywhere yesterday. I think there's 24 hours. She was on Zoom more than 24 hours yesterday. I fully believe that. I'm not sure.
Shelly Lofton's very magical. She's a unicorn. She can be in a lot of places a lot of time, and she looks good doing it too.
It was wonderful. She had a great job, but it was flipping through channels. There's Shelly. But wonderful to see just the way that ABA has embraced this part of conversation to say, let's bring people in, ask them the questions, and have the humility to find where the new questions and answers come from.
Yeah.
There was a great female-driven panel yesterday as well. Really starting to address more and more the conversation around DEI. I don't know if you caught some of that, but that was some great clips coming out of that.
I didn't catch that, but that's Natalie's session. Natalie Bartholomew. It's so important that we're having those conversations. And for a multitude of reasons, right? Not just as marketers who are marketing to diverse audiences, diverse geographies, and understanding the value of that, but as we talk about what is important to younger generations in particular, Gen Z is a great example. The things that are important to them are organizations that have social stance, that are ethically focused, that embrace diversity, and they talk about that and they represent that. People want to purchase from people that look like them, that understand them, that speak the same language as them too. And so I think there's obviously that core component of being a marketer and being a better marketer. But then certainly as we look at the institution of banking, we know and we recognize that historically it's been a very heavily male-dominated industry, a very white male-dominated industry. And I think it's incredible to see this changing conversation take place, and the concerted effort that banks are doing to really be vulnerable and acknowledge that, hey, maybe we don't represent our customer base in our boardrooms, and maybe we need to really rethink not just how we're hiring, but how we're driving growth within the organization for succession planning. The ABA did a really great study. I think it was a year or two ago on bank boards and C-suite executives with women in this particular study as well. And there was a piece of information in there that typically women are over mentored and under sponsored, meaning like people now are like investing in the development of women, but they're not really sponsoring them and saying, hey, Sarah needs to have that seat at the table. Like Sarah needs to get that promotion. Sarah is the one for that job. And so I think it's really incredible that we're acknowledging it. But I do also think that we all continue to need to have these conversations, not just at conference at this one time or go to a DEI, roundtable. Like we need to be having a hard look at ourselves and challenging, our leadership in every organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I referenced it some in my session yesterday, and in some of my conversations with some of the ABA leadership, we had that conversation, and they said, well, you okay talking about this? And so, well, absolutely. When we talk about this, on our leadership team in our organization, I'm happy to share some comments about it. But I think for many organizations, it is that elephant in the room. And I actually just learned of a bank last month that literally had someone dress up as an elephant, just to sort of like bring that conversation and say, we have to start having that conversation. Here's the photos of our leadership. Like it's time. And so I think really the thing that I wanted to focus on that is really in marketing has a really key role in that part of the conversation. We have this ability to say, hey, look, this is the perception of your organization. Let's help be a mirror to our own leadership and say, here's what's perceived outside. And let's talk about what's happening inside.
100%.
And I think it starts with how we're conversing with each other. And especially that's what I just loved Erica's session just on, connectual intelligence, and how do we have those conversations and how do we connect, especially in a virtual environment. Like this week has been so great for me because I finally, for the first time after a year of working with Jody, we got to meet in person for the first time. And so I look back on this past year of working, digitally, remotely over Zoom and phone calls, and the fact that we were able to build a trustworthy, working, communicative relationship like that, it takes work and it's hard. And so many of her takeaways that she went through was just like, I've been there, struggled through that, I've learned that, I need to learn that. Like it was just so practical in the working environment today. And how do you build those relationships? How do you have those conversations? I loved that session. It was great.
She did a really great job. And I think to connect the dots with the DEI conversation, she had some really tactical ways to drive dialogue, right? And I think that's a big piece of DEI, right? Is like giving people the voice to be able to share their experience, share their expertise, share their perspective, and even just some basic things that, like, with all these Zoom meetings, right? Like, are you utilizing chat functionality, right? Are you preparing for these conversations with like pre-prepared questions so everyone comes to the table prepared to have a discussion around whatever said topic is? How do you create an environment where the introverts still have a voice, right? Or the less experienced people still have a voice? And so that connecting intelligently conversation, I think, was very real, perfect timing. And I think everyone can take multiple nuggets of information away from that session.
Well, we are getting ready to kick off day 2 of the live stream. What sort of words do you have for everybody? What should they be catching? What did they miss yesterday? Besides my session.
Yeah,
I mean, clearly.
yeah. We have to shake this pug. Of course.
What sort of words do you have for everybody about engaging today?
Yeah.
Take notes.
Yeah, take lots of notes. You know, I would just really make sure to, you know, like we just talked about connecting virtually, right? That you're engaging with your peers. That's one of the most powerful things of conference, is to build that those relationships, build those peers, learn from each other, information share, because the relationships you build at conference will stay with you too. So be on the app, be on social media, follow the ABA hashtags. I think that's a great way to stay on top of like the trends and informations and remain connected. And then I would just say too, like, you know, maximize your time here, because again, these distractions of the real job are still going to be there tomorrow. So pay attention today, be in the moment, absorb it all. And yeah, there's a couple of sessions, like I have to give like Clark Hook, he's like my kindred spirit. He has a session this afternoon, and I think creativity and having a conversation around the importance of creativity is very, very relevant to when we talk about our commoditized industry, like how are you going to be different, right? And so that's a great session. I know Sarah and I are super pumped for, so make sure you check out that one. And obviously Ben's, your session from yesterday was timely. It was spot on. So yeah, making sure you're checking that out.
I think, to go off of your point, Jody, like giving yourself permission to take that time out of the day, watch the session, take notes, write down questions that you're going to bring back to the team. You know, it's so easy to check an email, respond to a thing, you know, but to give yourself permission of like, this information is so relevant and timely right now, and it's only going to make us better next week when we go back to those meetings, to those conversations, to our projects that we're working on, with investing in ourselves right now and today. And so, yeah, it's looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I think today's really a great day to be thinking about the next steps, right? How are we going to advocate for ourselves, for our department, for that better pizza pie? How do we think about involving others, right? Whether that be peers to say, how did you get this done? Or, you know, vendors to say, how has this worked in other locations? How has this worked in other banks? All of those kinds of conversations are great to be having today. And we look forward to catching you more online. So thanks for joining with us. And tweet at us, catch us one way or another. We'll find you online.
Yeah.